A family, one of those struggling kind of families that we were just talking about, had sold everything possible to pay bills and to put food on the table. And it was all gone, all used up. And yet, nevertheless, a burglar broke in one night when the family was gone. The family returned and the door was knocked off its hinges. Well, they put in a police report, and the police officer asked, "What did the burglar get?" The head of the household just shook his head and said, "Practice." That's all they got was practice. There wasn't anything there to steal. Jesus, though, was a master at keeping his listeners off balance. He always said, it seems like, the unexpected. He praised people that others despised. He lifted up those that others put down. It is more blessed to give than to receive. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for me will save it. And 2,000 years after his death and resurrection, theologians still wrestle with the exact meaning of those statements that he made. No better example can be found than the Beatitudes, which is our gospel text today. This is Luke's version. We're more used to Matthew's version. Many modern translators contend that the word happy is closer to Jesus' original meaning than blessed. Personally, I find that kind of a rather weak translation. I don't like it. But it doesn't help to translate it into happy, because that means, among other things, Jesus seems to be saying, if that's the case, that you are happy. Be happy being poor. You know, be happy being miserable. Be happy having nothing. Be happy being downtrodden by everybody. You should be happy about that. Like, really? Is that what he means? I kind of doubt it. You know, thanks but no thanks might be kind of our thinking. We don't want to be poor. We don't want to be downtrodden. I mean, we'd rather be like Michael Jordan. I mean, I read once that Jordan made enough money in a year pitching Nike shoes that he made more than all of the native peoples overseas who were producing all the shoes that were sold that year. Wow. Well, Michael's our role model, not some homeless fellow shuffling along the street looking for his next meal, right? We do not want to weep or mourn or be persecuted. It's bad enough that sometimes we feel the world seems to be against us. Comedy writer Robert Orban had a great line. He said, "Sometimes I get the feeling the whole world is against me, but deep down I know that's not true. Some of the smaller countries are just neutral." We all feel that way at times, don't we? But that's not how we want to feel. We're more comfortable with J.B. Phillips' parody of Jesus' beloved words. From one of his books, he writes, "Happy are the pushers, for they get on in the world. Happy are the hard-boiled, for they never let life hurt them. Happy are they who complain, for they get their own way in the end. Happy are the blasé, for they never worry about their sins. Happy are the slave drivers, for they get results. Happy are the knowledgeable people, for they know their way around. Happy are the troublemakers, for they make other people take notice of them." What is it that Jesus is trying to teach us today about happiness? Like I say, I don't think happiness is a good choice of word here, but we need to know that. We need to know the answer to that question. For you and I, we're not really poor like a lot in the world. We don't very often go hungry. We're not downhearted most of the time. We're not hated and we're not persecuted most of the time. And many of us are not happy either. In fact, according to some studies, people in our affluent, safe, comfortable society are more depressed than they have ever been. Where have we missed it, Lord? Where is the happiness to be found? First of all, let's dispel that notion that Jesus was a dewy-eyed dreamer out of touch with the real world. Thornton Wilder's Heaven's My Destination is a wonderful little satirical play about a poor soul who attempts to put the Sermon on the Mount into practice in his daily life. The results end up being disastrous. In one scene, he refuses to take interest on his savings account because he does not feel that that's proper because that's usury and it's not fair to make money off of money like that. Other customers, overhearing his argument with the teller at the bank, thinks there must be something wrong. Maybe the bank is going under. And so they're all trying to pull their money out, and the bank almost does go under because they're doing that. Just because of this one man's argument about not taking the interest on his account. The implication is that literal adherence to Jesus' teachings results either in comedy or in tragedy, depending on your sense of irony. When author Philip Yancey was teaching a class on the Beatitudes, he decided to incorporate into his lessons a video clip of Cecil B. DeMille's movie, King of Kings. As Yancey fast-forwarded through much of the movie, he watched another television nearby set on CNN. This happened to be at the end of the Gulf War, and CNN was featuring a speech by General Norman Schwarzkopf. The general pulled out maps and diagrams explaining in detail how American superior weaponry and training easily overcame Iraq. And then Philip Yancey switched his attention back and forth between that and the Jesus movie. Yancey found the place he was looking for in the movie. The scene was where Jesus preaches the Sermon on the Mount. And as the character of Jesus spoke of blessings upon the poor in spirit and the suffering, Philip Yancey caught the irony between these two things on these two different TVs. General Schwarzkopf was extolling the virtues of bigness, strength, power, conquering through force. Jesus was preaching on humility, lowliness, gratitude. His words must have been shocking to a subjugated people back in Israel 2,000 years ago, caught under the power of another much more superior nation. Why didn't he lead them in a bloody rebellion? A lot of people expected that of Jesus and were disappointed. Why didn't he establish a new kingdom? Could it be that he had a different kingdom in mind? Jesus did have a different kingdom in mind, a kingdom of the Spirit. He was no dewy-eyed dreamer. He knew his followers would be persecuted. He knew that many of them would be rejected by their own family and friends. He knew that many of them would live their lives on the edge of abject poverty because of their commitment to him. That's still true today in many parts of our world. Jesus knew the hardships that his followers would endure, but he wanted them to know that happiness is not dependent on outward circumstances. Happiness comes from within. But let's begin by admitting that Jesus was not in denial. Secondly, let's acknowledge that when people look for happiness elsewhere, they are less happy rather than more. Joseph R. Sizzo tells of visiting a luxurious estate, one of the most luxurious in America. Within the house were Italian fireplaces and Belgian tapestries and Oriental rugs and rare paintings. Sizzo said to a friend, "How happy the people must have been who lived here." But they weren't, his friend replied. Although they were millionaires, the husband and wife never spoke to each other. The place was a hotbed of hatred. They had no love of God or of one another. Where are you going to turn for happiness? Your work? There's certainly more satisfaction to be found in a job well done, yes. But today's fast-changing world is turning many talented intellectual people into the Willy Lomans of the day, people who have outlived their usefulness at the job they do. If work is your chief source of happiness, beware. It's a cruel world out there, as many people are discovering these days all too well. Of course, you have family. The Roper organization asked Americans what they believed constituted the good life. The ranking was instructive. First was material aspirations. Second was a happy marriage. And third was children. A Mass Mutual study of family values showed that 8 out of 10 Americans reported that their families were the greatest source of pleasure in their lives, more than friends, religion, recreation, or work. In a survey of 10,000 Better Homes and Gardens readers once, a majority of which were baby boomers at the time, more than half said that their relationship to their spouse was the single most important factor in their personal happiness. Well ahead of children, spiritual or religious beliefs, ahead of health or even financial security. We prize our families. But even family circumstances change, and we all know that. A spouse can bring great joy in your life and then can break your heart. So can children. And sooner or later, all of them leave home, whether for college or a family of their own or for the grave. If you have invested all you have and all you are in your family, where will you be then? In 1954, Billy Sicard's 12-year-old son, George, died of cancer. George was the center of Billy's life. She was a wealthy woman, and she lavished all the best toys and things on her son. After his death, Billy Sicard became a recluse. She refused to change anything in George's room. All of his clothes and toys stayed just where he'd left them. Billy cut off almost all of her social contacts. For the next 25 years, Billy spent all of her time at home grieving for George. She may have died in 1979, but her life actually ended in 1954. On what do you depend for your happiness? Jesus was no dewy-eyed dreamer. And experience has taught us that when people look elsewhere for the totality of their happiness, they always end up less happy rather than more happy. Finally, let's acknowledge that if we lived according to Christ's plan for our lives, we would have a zest for living that would know no bounds. Suppose we lived our lives having as our greatest values love for God and love for one another. Suppose instead of burning ourselves out seeking wealth or status, we lived all of our lives seeking to expand our divine potential so that we were continually improving our minds, improving our bodies, improving our spirits. Not out of fear, not out of insecurity, not out of greed, but simply out of living fully and completely as children of God. Can you see how much more productive, how much more effective, how much more alive we would be? This is what saintly living is all about. It's not about cloistering ourselves away from the world, though many saints have found much joy in developing that kind of intense relationship with God. For most of us, though, saintly living is about turning the world of human values on its head. It's about moving from values that are survival-based to values that are faith-based. It's about moving from a life that is self-centered to a life that is God-centered and other-centered. It's about moving from a life in which we are conscious of what we lack to a profound gratitude for all that we have. Thus we find true happiness and true blessedness. In 1989, columnist Nick Clooney decided that he, like a modern-day Huck Finn, wanted someone else to do his work for him for a little while. So he invited a variety of local celebrities from the Kentucky, Ohio area where he lived and worked to send in their ideas on a column about epitaphs. What would these famous men and women write on their own tombstones if they could? He was surprised by the wit and sincerity of the various responses. Ira Joe Fisher, a weatherman, wrote this epitaph for himself. He wanted the mind of Plato, the heart and soul of Socrates, but his life was more of a tribute to old mediocrities. Yeah, really. Paul Knew, the editor of the Cincinnati Post, could not make up his mind about what to write after he and his family went away for a weekend trip. When he returned, Paul knew that he wanted an epitaph that reflected the importance of his family in his life. He chose as his epitaph just two simple words: he cared. But the most sweetly whimsical message had to have been the one by Charlie Meacham, former head of Taft Broadcasting. His epitaph read, "Dear God, thanks for letting me visit. I had a wonderful time." Jesus was no dewy-eyed dreamer. Just the opposite. Jesus knew that lasting happiness is not found in wealth or a full stomach or the esteem of our friends or even family relationships, though all of these can satisfy for a while. All of these are important and good. But there's only one source for true and complete happiness, and that source is God. Amen? Amen. Amen.